Welcome, welcome everyone to today's Black Light Speakers Series session. So happy to have you all join us today. My name is Donna Demokunwa and I am the Vice President of Communication on the Loyola University Chicago Black Alumni Board. And we are pleased to present this discussion to you today and share with you some alumni experts who will talk about dismantling anti-Blackness in the justice system. And we're just really excited to host this and once again have you all join us. So today's discussion features Shalise Neal, who is a civil justice attorney, and also Grant, who is a criminal justice attorney. And later on today, you may see Andre in the news. He's involved with a high profile case. And so both of these alums are doing fantastic work in the community, and we're so happy to have them join us today. So thank you again for joining us. So right now I want to give a brief introduction to the Black Alumni Board to let you know who we are and what we do. So we have our president, Karen Fleshman. I'm going to talk about her toward the end because she's actually our moderator for today's discussion. But we have Saritha Yokley, who is our secretary, and she does a fantastic job with keeping us organized and recording all of our meeting minutes and notes. We also have Jay Yancey, who is our treasurer. He's also fantastic in what he does and keeping us on board with our finances and always has great ideas to share with the board. We have Shakira Richards, who is the Vice President of Student Services, and Shakira is very involved with the Black Cultural Center, which is the Black student group on campus, and also with student recruitment and retainment at Loyola for Black students specifically. And then you have myself, Donna Demokunwa, who is the vice president, of communication. So I handle, along with Shakira, social media and also online digital marketing for the Black Alumni Board. And we are dedicated to helping re-engage Black alumni to the university and connecting with Black students at Loyola. So more specifically, let's talk about Karen Fleshman. Karen is the president of the Black Alumni Board. She's also the owner of Haskins Advisory Group, LLC, and she will be moderating today's discussion. And, you know, Karen has put in a lot of work in preparing for this discussion, and she is definitely passionate about this topic. And I'm so excited that she's going to be moderating this discussion. And you all are really in for a treat. So not only will you get to hear from our experts, but you're going to get some background too as to why this particular discussion and topic is so important. You know, we see what's happening in the community, in our country, worldwide, even in Nigeria as well right now. So based on what's happening right now, we wanted to bring this discussion to the forefront. And Karen, thank you so much for being willing and ready to facilitate the discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our president, Karen Fleshman.
Karen, you're muted.
Karen, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Dawn. I'd like to start off by saying I'm very happy to be the moderator of this exciting and informative event. And I'm going to start by talking about the Black Light series. This is our third installment of the Black Light series, and it has truly been a labor of love. The board has put in a lot of work, you know, to bring these three installations to you. And so they've been very well received, you know, by the university, you know, and we're extremely excited about this, you know, this third, which will be our last Black Speaker Series, at least for 2020. So you may wonder where did the name of the series came from, and it actually came from Jay. And the series is designed to illuminate the Black alumni at Loyola and to highlight how they've carried Loyola's missions and principles, into their work life, into their careers, into their affiliations. And the name Black light is derived from the function of a Black light, which is designed to illuminate things that are hidden and not seen. And we felt like that was a metaphor for a lot of Black students' experience, within Loyola University. And just continuing, what I'd like to do next is to talk about our series today. Dawn talked about it, so what we're going to talk more about is dismantling of the anti-Blackness in the justice system. And we know that anti-Blackness is pervasive and is dominant in every aspect of our society. And the mentality, so what we're going to do here is we're going to focus on the mentality of anti-Blackness, and we're going to cover like how Black people have been criminalized and also subjected to unjust treatment and penalties. And we're going to, so what we've done here is we've brought together two legal experts who will help us understand the justice system and how it affects Black people, and then ultimately provide solutions on how we can move forward to improve it so that it moves toward being equitable for everyone. So what I'd like to do is to introduce our distinguished panel. I'll start with Shalise Walker Neal Murray, and I'm going to be referring to her as Attorney Neal. Attorney Neal is a 2013 alum of Loyola with dual degrees in law and also in social work. After law school, Attorney Neal worked for legal aid and then went to work for Cook County Jail as a high school equivalency instructor for adults. In 2014, Shalise joined the Justice Entrepreneurs Program, which focuses on helping new attorneys create social conscious and sustainable law practices. In 2005, Shalise started Chicago Advocate Legal LLC. It was a solo practice, and Shalise decided then that she would charge flat and subscription rates for her clients based on their income. During this time, Shalise also went back to Loyola to obtain her master's in computer science with the focus on software development, and use these skills to develop a computer algorithm to predict income-based fees. In 2016, Shalise partnered with Brian Gilbert, also in the Justice Entrepreneurs Program, and a Chicago Advocate. And then the two of them came together, and the Chicago Advocate Legal NFP was born. Shalise specializes in family law, guardianship with minors, and DCFS appeals, which is the Department of Children and Family Services. She is also a teaching assistant in Loyola, Master of Jurisprudence program. Another program that Shalise focuses on is the Preventive Law Initiative, which aims to prevent negative court involvement for low-income families. Shalise works at the Center for the Human Rights of Children as a research assistant. She worked on children trafficking issues primarily, and now she's a child labor trafficking attorney. In August of this year, Shalise also started a PhD program at UIC in social work. She is primarily interested in addressing systemic issues in the Cook County Domestic Relations Court and child support enforcement. Shalice practices law because of the power of words, and that words have power whether they're written or spoken, to break, to bend, to inspire, to encourage, to protect, to empower, to challenge our acceptance of the way things are. Her earliest impression of people helping others were lawyers, counselors, advocates, using their words to defend others, to challenge the standard way of doing things. Christ is her biggest influence as an advocate for everyone. So we'd like to welcome Attorney Neal. So happy to have you, and what an amazing background you have here. You know, you've been very busy over the last 5 years with your education, starting your own nonprofit. Very, very impressive. Next, I'd like to introduce you to our second speaker, a very distinguished speaker, attorney excuse me, Andre Grant. Attorney Grant received his bachelor's degree in philosophy from Loyola, and in 1993, he graduated from the University of Iowa College of Law, where he served as president of the Black Law Students Association. He began his legal career with the law firm Stanley Hill and Associates. In 1996, Attorney Grant started his own law firm, the Law Office of Attorney M. Grant. Attorney Grant was retained by the family of an 8-year-old boy falsely accused of the brutal murder and sexual assault of an 11-year-old girl. From the beginning, Attorney Grant argued vehemently that the police had framed the 8-year-old and his 7-year-old playmate. The charges against the 7 and 8-year-old children were dropped due to the commitment and dedication of Attorney Grant and the Chicago Dream Team. The Dream Team subsequently sued the city and the police department and secured a sizable settlement on behalf of the 8-year-old. Through this, Attorney Grant has the distinction of successfully defending 2 boys believed to be the nation's youngest murder suspects. So this has been identified as a landmark case. Attorney Grant was a member of the Chicago Legal Dream Team that consisted of his law partner and noted defense attorney Louis Meyer Jr. and his mentor, retired appellate court Justice R. Eugene Pincham. R. Eugene Pincham was very active, and some would almost say responsible, and spearheaded the election of Chicago's first Black mayor, Harold Washington. Attorney General is the recipient of numerous awards, among them the Cook County Bar Association, excuse me, William R. Means Jr. Award, the Final Call Leadership in Law Award, and the Midwest Community Council Award for Legal Excellence, and many more. He is a regular guest on WVON, which is one of the nation's first Black radio stations. And he's also been a guest speaker at Fox News. He's been profiled and featured in Chicago Sun-Times Tribune and Crane Chicago Business. He's the past president of the Cook County Board Association, a member of the Federal Trial Bar, and practices personal injury and criminal and entertainment law. He's also an associate professor in criminal justice at Chicago State. But mostly what Attorney Grant is the most proud of is his son, Jamal, a Hampton University graduate, and his 14-year-old daughter, Sydney. So I welcome Attorney Andre Grant. So we've got a lot of material to cover here, and I'm sure you guys share with me, that our panel is very impressive. So what I'd like to do, my first question is, I'd like to present to, Attorney Grant. For those of us who have limited access to the justice system, can you explain what it is and how it works?
Sure. Again, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be with the Black Alumni Association and to be part of the Black Light series. The criminal justice system, as the illustration points out, is basically broken up into three parts: law enforcement, the court system, and the correction system. And when we say law enforcement, we're talking about police. The criminal justice system begins and kind of ends with the police. That's the first encounter that a normal citizen would have, is with the police. And that starts from being stopped or frisked, or even something as simple as having your car pulled over for not having your lights on, or any of that can quickly result to a full search of your car and so on and so forth. The police are the front line. After there is an arrest, then the next procedure is that it goes into the court system. And when it goes into the court system, you're dealing with prosecutors. They are the next line of defense. And the prosecutors and the police work hand in hand. And when you're in the court system, if you've been arrested, you have to go through a bond process or a bond hearing to determine whether or not you're detained or pending trial, or you were released on home monitoring, or you will be allowed to post a cash bond. But that's when at that point, you're in the heart of the system. And from the bond hearings, a determination is ultimately made whether or not there's enough evidence for this matter to be assigned to a trial judge. And when the trial judge gets involved, you are fully involved in the adversarial system. That means that there is a prosecutor and there is a defense attorney, whether that's a private defense attorney like myself or a public defender, but it is an adversarial system. Then you go through this trial process, and you can have a bench trial or a jury trial. And of course, a bench trial is when the judge makes a determination of guilt of innocence. And a jury trial is when 12 citizens like yourself, ordinary people, make a determination of whether or not of guilt and innocence. After that, you go to the sentencing phase. If you're found guilty, of course, if you're found not guilty, the case is dismissed. But if you're found guilty, you have to go through sentencing. And sentencing is a determination of what do we do with the person now, depending on what the defense is. Do we give them supervision? Do we give them probation? Is this a matter that requires jail time? After that process, and then if it's jail time, then you go into corrections. Either you can be in jail waiting trial. That's normally in the Cook County jail. But after the trial, if you're convicted, if you're sentenced to prison, then you are assigned to the Illinois Department of Corrections, but that doesn't necessarily end it. There's also an appeal process. And I guarantee you, everybody that's in jail or everybody that goes to prison, whether they committed the offense or didn't commit the offense, they are involved in the appeals process, having a higher court determine whether or not the lower court did the job properly. And then even after that, you have things called post-conviction appeals, where people who may have been convicted wrongfully begin to challenge that conviction. So it is a long system, but it begins with law enforcement, to sentencing, to correction and penitentiary, and even post-conviction petitions.
Karen, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Grant. That was very informative and fascinating, and it definitely demonstrates how complicated the system is to navigate. And also the fact that it starts, as you said, it starts and stops, with law enforcement, and that's the police officers. So my next question is for, Attorney Neal. And Attorney Neal, what I'd like to ask you is, can you let us know who is Lady Justice? We know that she's a symbol, but exactly what does she stand for?
Lady Justice is a pretty old symbol. A lot of different cultures over the course of the human experience have had some form of her. In the United States, she does represent the justice system, and the blindfold obviously means that she's supposed to make decisions on justice without regard to wealth, power, gender, race, any of those things. The scales in her hand are supposed to represent balancing evidence and facts. But what happens in reality in the justice system is much different than what she symbolizes. And there are two systems that people can find themselves involved in: the criminal justice system and the civil system. And neither of them are representative of justice for most people.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Absolutely.
What my colleague pointed out, the whole notion of justice being blind is absolutely nonsense. When we talk about wealth and power and race and gender, we live in a system where the truth is how much justice can you afford? And any person who's been charged with a crime knows that if you can't hire a good lawyer, and good lawyers cost money, and great lawyers cost even more, it costs money to be involved in the criminal justice system. You heard that expression that crime doesn't pay. Crime pays very well. It pays very well for lawyers that are good. It pays the criminal justice system well. It pays. And a lot of times, if you are wealthy and white, you can get out of a lot of stuff. And one of the problems that our community face is that they are poor and people of color. And if you don't have any money in the criminal justice system, you're just in trouble. It's a lot like the medical system. I mean, you go to the doctor, man, you get a doctor bill, that thing is incredible if you don't have insurance. The legal system requires money, even if it's civil, even if you're going through a divorce, even if you're being sued by a debt collector. When you walk in that courtroom by yourself and you don't have an ability to hire counsel, you're in trouble. So this whole notion of Lady Justice being blind, she's not blind. She got her eyes wide open and she sees your color, your money or lack of money, and your gender.
And you know what? And actually, that's a very good segue, into the next couple of slides here. And thank you for those comments, Attorneys Grant and also Attorney Neal. So next slide. So what does justice look like for Blacks in America? So we're going to go to the next slide. And this is what Lady Justice looks like to us. That as Attorney Grant just stated, that the blindfold is wide open and the scale, is totally imbalanced, right? And so this is how the justice system looks for Black people. And as Attorney Grant stated, decisions are made based on wealth, instead of culpability, for a particular crime. So, we understand that, uh, wealth, power, and gender and race, are not balanced in this system. So next, what we'd like to do is, to understand, so how did this happen? How did this injustice happen? And so where we want to start is, we want to start at the beginning. And the beginning can actually go back a lot further, but we had to have a starting point here. And so, so when we think about the slavery being abolished as a result of the 13th Amendment, there was a loophole or a clause that, basically states that, so slavery is prohibited, under the Constitution, and involuntary servitude, that you can't do it except as a punishment for a crime in which one has been convicted. And so that loophole has actually permeated throughout our culture. And so my next question is for Attorney Grant. And as a prominent criminal defense attorney, you're known for taking on some difficult, high-profile cases where you fought to exonerate your clients because of wrongful prosecution. Can you share with us what is the Black Code and how is it designed to ensure that it does not work, that the system does not work for Black people?
Well, one of the, I think that's a great question, Karen. When we talk about the 13th Amendment and we talk about the abolishment of slavery, except for punishment, the abolishment of slavery and involuntary servitude, except for punishment for crimes. One of the things that we have to understand is, after the Emancipation Proclamation and after the end of slavery, we were promised, our ancestors were promised 40 acres and a mule. And we know that we didn't get any of that. So we are told at this point that you're free and that you can go. But where could we go? You have no money, you have no land, you have no property. So as our people begin to leave the plantations, they begin to go into other communities to look for work. Now keep in mind, they have no homes, we have no homes, but we're going into these communities to look for work. A lot of these same communities were resistant to us even coming into town. So when they came into town, they began to create laws that made even standing around a crime. Laws like loitering, and you can get 10 to 15 years in jail for loitering. We're talking about people who had just left slavery, coming into town looking for work, maybe sleeping somewhere because they don't have any place to go, being woken up, charged with a crime, you arrested. And not only are you arrested, but the process of involuntary servitude began again. So now you find yourself working someplace, doing hard labor. You've heard that expression, 10 years of hard labor. You go right back into slavery. The Black codes were set up. These were a list of laws and rules that made certain behavior criminal. It just made it criminal. I'm trying to think of some good examples of it. One of certainly was the loitering, and some places even reading, the ability to seeing you reading a book, or meeting in a group where there was no white person present. All of these things were laws that you could be arrested for. And so the system of policing actually began with the freeing of the slaves and slaves patrols to incarcerate and reintroduce Black people to slavery in the form of involuntary servitude. And it still goes on today. Our community is under siege. I mean, literally, we are underprotected and over-policed. We don't get the same protections that go on in other white communities. And that's why you see the type of social unrest that you see right now in America. And it goes on in every single major city in America. This is not, it's not a Chicago thing or a Baltimore thing or a Ferguson thing. This is going on all over the place. And in my opinion, it is a continuation of the Black codes or the slave codes that went on almost over 100 years ago.
Absolutely. Yes. And as you stated, it is and it was just a different form of slavery. And in some cases, Black people, we were actually going back to our previous master, to the plantation that we worked on, as a slave. We're supposed to be free, and we were going back to those plantations and farms.
And Karen,
and then also,
Karen, can I add one more thing? There was a statute, it was something called reckless eyeballing, meaning that you looked at somebody funny, or God forbid you looked at a white woman, just these type of ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. We can't forget Emmett Till was murdered because he allegedly whistled or looked at a white woman, which did not happen. So it's those type of not just petty offenses, but absolutely ridiculous offenses. Reckless eyeballing.
Yeah. And next slide, Hannah. And also, another key thing was that, the Black convicts that were, that were former slaves and were supposed to be free, and were convicted, for those, those minor charges. In some cases, they were being, and this is happening today as well, is that they were being leased out to private companies. They were leased out to universities. I'm sure you guys have, seen some of the information that's coming out of Princeton University, where they're actually owning up to, the progress that the university was able to make through slave labor and also through Black convict labor back in the early part of the 20th century, if you will. Okay, thank you for those comments. So what I'd like to do now is, as we continue to dismantle, the anti-Blackness in this justice system, what we're going to be doing is showing you some slides. We're not going to talk to all of the slides, but the slides illustrate, some of the impact to Black people of police brutality and injustice, in the system. So next, what we'd like to do, and our next question is for Attorney Nail. And as a civil justice attorney leading a nonprofit that works on behalf of families who find themselves in the court system, what are some of the challenges that your clients experience before seeking your services? And are these challenges related or due to systemic racism?
Generally, people come to us, they are already in crisis. It means perhaps a child was taken away, domestic violence, homelessness, a number of different, indicated by DCFS, a number of different things have come together to result in this. And it's definitely a result of systemic racism. We're talking about a lack of resources in Black communities that have resulted in more familial problems. So lack of employment opportunities, poor education opportunities, contact with the police. When you have communities that lack resources for not just a couple of years, but a couple of decades, it affects families. And they don't have the necessary resources and tools to navigate solutions without becoming court involved or without being forced into a court. So it's essentially like a funnel. All these things compile onto a family, and it forces them into the civil justice system. And as Andre had stated before, you need a lawyer, generally speaking, in most of these cases, and most families can't afford them. And in civil court, generally, you're not entitled to a lawyer. So you have to go to court for yourself. And the court system itself then looks at you differently. They look at the way you dress. They look at the way you speak. They look at the shoes you carry. I don't know how many judges I've heard ask young men who don't have jobs, who have actively been seeking, well, how did you get those shoes? If you can get those shoes, then you can afford to pay child support. And they might say, well, my mom's got the shoes for me, or something like that. The other thing you are forced to deal with is people are then appointed to your case, especially if it's like a custody issue. And those people are child reps or GALs, and they are a lot of the times also white. And they come from middle class or upper middle class backgrounds, and they have very little understanding of the families that they're working with. And they also charge a lot of money. And you don't really have the option as much as to whether or not they're on your case if the court appoints them to your case. They can charge as much as, I've seen as much as $600 an hour to people they know can't afford it. And when you don't pay your attorney in the civil court system, they can then go after your wages. They can garnish your income for failing to pay them when they knew that you couldn't afford to pay them to begin with. So not only now are you trying to address your family issues, but now you also have an attorney that you have to pay, or part of your paycheck goes to them. There's just so much going on with the way the system impacts particularly African-American families that it makes it difficult for a family to come out of the system whole or better off. They generally come out worse off. Now, having money does help, because if you can afford an attorney, it's a game changer for you if you can afford a good attorney. But if you can't afford a good attorney, you've already lost. You have to figure out how to even file your case without any prior experience. Then you have, and the court system doesn't treat you like a person who doesn't know what to expect or what to do. They treat you as if you're supposed to know everything about how to approach a legal case. And, you know, I remember sitting in the courtroom once and someone comes in and he asks, is this the right courtroom? This is my name. And the clerk yells at him for talking in court. It changed the rest of the morning for him. So I think that the systemic issues with regard to a lack of resources, but also the way that the court approaches pro se litigants, so a person who does not have a lawyer, are disproportionately affect Black families. And it's actually pretty devastating to them.
Karen, can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I don't know if we saw some of the statistics that you put up, but it's absolutely shocking. I mean, those statistics are absolutely shocking. For instance, the statistics, just right there, when we talk about the early contact that people of color have with the criminal justice system, one of the things that was pointed out is that it begins in school. It begins, you know, there is a such thing of the crime of being Black, just being Black. You don't have to have done anything wrong. There's something about America that has a problem with the color of people's skin. And the darker your skin, the bigger the problem that they have with you. So our children are disproportionately disciplined in the school system compared to white students. We are quickly go from the school pipeline to the prison pipeline, things that should be handled. I remember, for instance, when I was a child, I went to Holy Angels Grammar School, and I was about 9 or 10 years old. I found some matches in the bathroom, and the older kids used to smoke cigarettes in the bathroom, and I found these matches. And unbeknown to me, with my silly self, I lit the match on some toilet paper. And the toilet paper, I tried to put it out, but it began to burn, and there was a fire in the bathroom. So I ran out, but I went to this Catholic school, and one of the nuns saw me running, and she grabbed me, and the priest saw me, and they took me back in there, and there was a fire in the bathroom, and everybody had to leave, and I got in trouble. Well, guess what? They called my mom. They just called my mom, and I was disciplined for it. But they called my mom. What they did not do is handcuff me and take me to the police station. And I guarantee you, if a kid, 8 or 9-year-old kid, starts a fire right now in the school, he's going to jail. He will be handcuffed and taken to jail. So that process of criminalizing our children starts very early. The other statistic that you showed, the likelihood of a Black man in his lifetime going to prison, 1 out of 3 Black men will end up in prison. That is absolutely shocking. 1 in 6 for Latino men, 1 in 17 for white men. Those are shocking statistics. How about for Black women? Black women are just as likely, more likely to go to prison than anybody else. 1 out of 18, 1 out of 45 for Latinos, 1 in 111 for whites. These are shocking. And it's because of the way that our communities are policed, plain and simple. And the selective prosecution, who gets charged with crimes for the same offense.
Thank you both, Attorney Grant and also Attorney Neal. That was.
I'm sorry, Karen. One more thing. You also put up a statistic about who's likely to get killed by the police. African Americans, not just men. Police are killing Black women. This is not, it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening that you are more likely to die in a traffic stop if you are Black, period. In the case that I was on today, that's going to be all over the news right now. People still texting me, but it involved a Black man who the police said had a gun in the car. They took the gun from him and then shot him in the back of the head with the same gun they took from him. I mean, just frightening conduct. We have another video of the same officer pulling a Black woman out of the car, body slamming her, kneeing her in the back, same police officer. He should have been fired 7 years ago, but nothing happened to them. Nothing happened to them. I'm done.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Yes, and thank you for referring to those slides, because that's the exact reason that they were there. We wanted to show people, statistically illustrate, what life looks like for Black people in this country. So this all seems so insurmountable. I mean, so how do we fix this? Can it be fixed? What can we do as a society to improve this situation? And I'm going to send this question to you first, Attorney Grant. What are your thoughts here? It's obvious the system is broken, okay? And then it's so complicated. I've always had respect for attorneys, and researching and listening to your comments here, it's just heightened my respect for attorneys, that anyone could navigate this system to, some form of success. So my question is for, I'll start off with Attorney Grant. How do you fix it?
Well, first of all, it can be fixed. It can be fixed, and it must be fixed. And we all have a responsibility to be part of the solution to fix it. my mom used to say all the time, are you polluting the world, or are you helping to clean up the mess? We all have to be a part of helping to clean up the mess. And we cannot wait till it happens to us personally. And we cannot wait till it happens to a family member or a loved one. It happens now. We have to be vigilant. It starts with police reform. We have to have some serious discussions on how communities, poor communities and communities of color, how the police interact with individuals. We have to make an asserted effort to be jurors. We have to participate in the jury process. We should not do things, we shouldn't not show up for jury duties, because you can make a difference sitting on that jury. You can be the key to someone really getting justice in the criminal justice system. I think that there are so many levels. We have to deal with this mass incarceration issue. There's been a 790% increase in the federal population since 1980s. And that's an astounding number. 790% increase in the prison population. We are a nation, our only solution to a problem is to put people in jail. That's the only solution we have. And we have to come up with other solutions other than mass incarceration. We have to reform our drug laws. How many Black men, Latino men, even poor white men in jail for things like marijuana that they now have said it is legal? There are people still in jail for that. And not only that, the severity of drug sentencing. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. Where you can have, I represented a young man in a drug conspiracy case in federal court. He had maybe $30 worth of cocaine. However, when he was sentenced, he got life in prison. He got life in prison based on his background, this 3 strikes you out business. I mean, so our jails are filled with men and women who are serving outrageous sentences for drug offenses that they're trying to get rid of. And we have to do something about the lack of access to the criminal justice system for people that are poor. I mean, poor people get the worst shake altogether, because if you have no money, nobody's going to fight for you. And though there are great public defenders, there are a lot of good public defenders, very good lawyers. The problem is they are overworked, they are understaffed, they don't have the same resources that the prosecutors have, and sometimes they never meet the client until the day of court. And you can't defend somebody that way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's 790% increase. I mean, it's insanity. Somebody, has to recognize, besides Black people, that this is a problem. And I love what you said, about participation. So we've got an election coming up, so voting, and it starts there as well. So you've got voting, and then also jury duty, and then as a citizen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the ability to, petition, our elected officials, to complain, about, some of this injustice that we're experiencing, and to have them as advocates as well. So my next question, I like to, turn it to the civil justice, our direction to the civil justice system. And as we know, and Attorney Neal talked about this already, that, it's broken as well. And so, how has the civil justice system impacted Black families? And this question is for Attorney Neal.
I like what Andre said about voting. And it's interesting. I mean, the election's coming up. People don't think as much about voting for judges. In Illinois, we vote for judges. and a lot of other states too. And people need to vote. You need to vote for who you're putting on the bench, because those are the people making decisions about things. And I know that it's not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have some ability to affect it. I think attorneys play a big role here too. Attorneys shouldn't charge outrageous legal fees for people they know can't pay it. If you have someone come to your office and they make $20,000 a year, why on earth would you charge them a $5,000 retainer? And that's just the retainer. That's not what they will pay in total. We've had people come to us with bills from their prior attorneys upwards of $80,000. They have liens on their houses, things like that. We have to work together more if we're going to help Black communities, if we're going to help low-income communities, because those of us with the skills, we are the resource. We're the resource. We're the ones who can go it and we can give it to others. And I'm not saying you have to, live in a box under a bridge in order to help people, but you also don't need to try and make millions off of people who don't have millions. A big thing I think could be addressed is improving the requirements to be a guardian ad litem. A number of these cases, a guardian ad litem is appointed in custody cases, especially when the two parties can't afford a lawyer. Otherwise, they just end up in court for years because none of them know how to move the case forward. And then they appoint people to the case who are supposed to, figure out what's in the best interest of the child and making a report to the court. But I've had guardian ad litems tell clients stuff like, well, your windows are tinted. And to white people like me, that makes me think you're a bad person, in other words. You can't say stuff like that and expect that person's going to be a good guardian ad litem and look out for the best interest of a child. We've had people say stuff like, well, you have two children sleeping in a bed, so maybe them spending overnights with you isn't the best thing. It's not the end of the world if two people sleep in a bed together. I mean, if you're looking at how you live as a lawyer or as a guardian ad litem and how what the family you're working with lives, and you require them to live up to your standard, that's not going to work. I think that lawyers should not be legally allowed to charge people more than they can afford to pay. And if they do charge them, they shouldn't be allowed to garnish their wages or go so far as, so we don't talk about it much, but in civil court, you can have a civil contempt order. And if you do, you end up in jail. And a lot of the times people end up with these civil contempt orders for failing to pay something, whether it's the GAL, whether it's the child rep, whether it's their own attorney, whether it's child support. So we're putting people in jail for not being able to pay when we knew they couldn't pay in the first place. I think that there should be some kind of system in place that is less punitive when it comes to child support enforcement. There are numbers of studies that show that those who don't pay, they don't pay because they just don't want to care for their child. There is this narrative out there that of the deadbeat dad. And that narrative primarily has a young Black man as the poster face. But that is not always the case. And in fact, more often than not, it's not the case. But if you have a previous, if you have a background, it could be hard for you to get employed. If you don't have a lot of education, it could be hard for you to get a job. And, you're not entitled to a lawyer at your contempt hearing that could potentially put you in jail in civil court. Now, the law allows for judges to appoint lawyers, but they don't. So now you're in a contempt proceeding. You have no legal representation. The other person on the other side of the case is the state's attorney, and you can go to jail. And it's considered that you have the keys to get out. All you have to do is pay what you owe. Oh, that's how families are often negatively impacted. They monetarily, emotionally, psychologically, and of course, there's the jail aspect. And then I would say just the final piece would be that we need more mental health services. We need people who provide those services to do it at low cost or flat fees, because a lot of families are just waiting. They don't have the money to get the necessary services that they may need to see their child. So they have to do it through one or two organizations that offer it. And those waiting lists can be 8 months. 8 months. You're waiting. So those with the skills need to be able to provide them. I think voting is important. And we need to get out in front of these, because a lot of these issues, you can see them before they become legal problems, and they're preventable.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so now we've talked, a lot. We got educated on the system, so we know how the system works, or maybe say doesn't work. It definitely doesn't work for us. We've illustrated through the slides some of the examples, of the impact. We also illustrated through quite a few of the charts that were shown, the disparity between the races. And so now what we want to do is move to solutions. And, excuse me, we've only have like a few minutes to do that. So, with that being said, as these slides are moving forward, I hope you all found this webinar to be helpful in the understanding of the system and the systemic racism, that Black people face in this country of, injustice and, police brutality. Our whole purpose here was, to dismantle the system. And I think that the panelists did an amazing job with that. And so it's always important, to see the light. And I love the fact that, both of our speakers, they feel that the system can be fixed. And I think it starts with voting and voting for judges. I know that's not new, but normally when you go into that voting booth, you're just like picking off numbers. You don't know who these people are. And so now, the stakes have been raised. We need to understand that their records, who exactly are we voting for, and, to understand, like what their positions are as it relates to justice, within their particular area of law. So,
Karen, can I add one thing to that comment?
absolutely.
I don't mind telling you, and I'm sure my colleague would agree with me, we don't know who a lot of these judges are. I mean, this process, we need to vote for judges because it's important, because we can vote them off the bench as well. But a lot of these judges, we don't know who they are. I mean, we have to, so we know the lay people don't know these judges. It's a real labor process to even identify who the judges are and whether to vote for them or not to vote for them. So, but there are organizations like the Cook County Bar Association, there are independent groups who can give you their thoughts. I know Operation Push puts out a list of judges. There are some, I have a list that I prefer myself, but that process is hard. It's very hard for a layperson to determine who these judges are and who to vote for.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And so, you know what, it's all got to end, with hope, and just knowing that there are a lot of organizations that are on the forefront, trying to address these issues. And I think one of the main things that's happened that from my perspective has never happened is that, people, and I have to say specifically, white people, are asking the question of, they see the injustice. And I'm not going to say for the first time, but you know, they see the injustice and they're wondering, like, how can this be happening, you know, in our great country? And they actually are taking it a step further to say, you know, what can I do? And so from my perspective, that's progress. And I see that as being, you know, hope for the future. So I want to thank my panelists, and you know, we're at the top of the hour, so we won't be able to take any questions. But I want to thank my panelists for the amazing education that they've given us, and you know, just really demonstrated their passion for this law and for law, and then also, you know, their expertise. It's definitely an education session here, and we very much appreciate your time. And from here, what I like to do is to, you know, close out the panelist part of it, you know, and move on to the Black Life Speaker Series. So just want to give you an update on this. You know, as I stated earlier, this is the third and final installment for 2020. And as we move into 2021, we're going to be having like monthly webinars. And again, you know, continuing from the perspective of illuminating our alums and the amazing things that they're doing, you know, within their careers. And then if you're interested, you know, in being a speaker, you know, you certainly can drop an email. You know, we would love to, you know, to talk to you about being a speaker in the series. And then next, I'd like to talk about our general meeting. So this is going to be the board's first general meeting, and it's November the 11th at 6:30, of course, via Zoom. And our featured speaker is Dr. Rooney. So we're very excited, you know, to have her to come out. And this general meeting is open to all Black alumni, and there will be additional information coming out about that shortly. So I want to thank everyone for joining and staying on the call, and we really appreciate your time and attention. And also, you know, you can find us on LinkedIn and also Facebook. You know, we have, you know, our own social media pages. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.